We are Mad Lads, and this is our meal and recipe planner app. The main problem that inspired this recipe app is that a user struggles with planning meals throughout the week. They want to find recipes that meet all of their dietary needs. However, searching for recipes, making grocery lists, and knowing exactly what's best is a hassle. On top of that, people are often busy and don't have the time to plan ahead every night, especially when they are trying to eat healthier or stick to a certain diet. Many apps out there are cluttered, overly complicated, or require constant internet access. Therefore, the user needs an app that is straightforward, organized, streamlined, and simple to discover recipes, save their favorites, plan their weekly meals, and generate grocery lists, online or offline. Our app aims to reduce stress and give users control over their meal planning in a clean and efficient way. Some general requirements were needed for this app. The system shall display a list of recipes with images, ingredients, and instructions, so users always know exactly what they're making. The system shall allow users to filter recipes according to their preferences, whether they are vegetarian, vegan, or gluten free. These filters help ensure that users don't waste time browsing meals that don't really fit them. The system shall allow users to add recipes to a weekly meal planner. The meal planner is formatted to show 7 days of the week, that's Monday through Sunday, and recipes shall be added to each day according to the user's decisions. This gives them a clear overview of what they plan to cook during the week. The system shall provide a recipe detail screen that shows all ingredients and instructions in a readable way, making the actual cooking process easy to follow. The system shall generate a grocery list based on meals listed in the meal plan, meaning that all of the ingredients from the selected recipes shall be transferred into one organized shopping list that a user can reference at the store. If a user finds a recipe that they would like to bookmark or come back to later, the system shall allow them to easily save their favorites for quick access. The system shall store meal plans locally so that it can be accessed offline, which is useful for people with limited data or bad service. The system shall support smooth navigation between all of the tabs and screens so that there isn't any unnecessary lag or delay that could frustrate users. And finally, the system shall allow users to share recipes with others so they can send meals to their friends and family. To properly implement these features, the app receives input from the user. These are inputs such as recipe name, description, and image, ingredient entries such as name, quantity, and units, that's tablespoons, grams, pounds, and so on, instructions for the recipe, dietary filter selections, favorite toggles, and actions performed to share a recipe. These inputs allow the user to customize their meals and store personal preferences. The app then returns outputs to the user with full recipe details, a filtered recipe list that matches the user's preferences, a saved favorites list that can be accessed at any point, a weekly meal plan view with all of the recipes organized correctly, a generated grocery list created directly from the meal plan, confirmations when recipes are saved to favorites, and shared recipe data through the device's share options. These outputs work together to keep the user informed and support their planning progress from start to finish. The app has dynamic search and filtering features to ensure that users find what they need. It lets users search for recipes by name, filter by tags, and it can exclusively show favorites upon request. This is designed to reduce browsing time and help the user narrow down their options instantly. A database query was built based on the user's chosen filters. If a user types out a name, we use a like match to find similar results. If favorites only is toggled, then recipes that are only marked as favorites are the ones returned, and they have an index of one stored in the database. If tags are selected, then the tag IDs are cross-checked in the tag table to make sure that only recipes with those dietary labels appear. The only recipes that are returned are ones that match every single selected filter. This ensures that the user only sees what's relevant to them so that it can be easy, accessible, and fast. It also makes the app feel more personal and responsive to the individual needs of the user.
When it came down to designing the UI, we decided that a cookbook style theme would be appropriate given that this app displays a lot of recipes for the user. And to adhere to that theme, we decided to go with warm pastel colors. In this case, red, since it's known to induce hunger. And in addition to that, we used a tiled checkered background to also follow the sort of cookbook theme, since a lot of cookbooks have that sort of pattern on the back pages. Additionally, we decided to go with more of a minimalist design. So instead of having many buttons for every single object for it to do every single function, we kept the number of buttons per page, unless it was necessary to have many, um, to a smaller count, and also kept the layout simple. On the home page, you'll see that it's just a grid with a search bar above it with all the cards. And speaking of the recipe cards, these were made to be interactable, such that instead of having a button to interact with them, the card itself can be interacted with to display the recipe. And we also sought to have a smooth experience using these cards. Um, and this was implemented with animations that make it more pleasing when you're interacting with search functions. In this case, it is the animation that allows it to move up and fade in when first being generated. And lastly, for the design, we went with a tab layout, just because it'd be easy to switch between certain sections that you may need, whether you're looking at a recipe and then switching to another tab for the meal planner, then switching to another for the grocery list. So we kept the tab bar at the bottom, since that's the most common place for a mobile app, given the ergonomics of holding it on a phone rather than using a mouse for a computer. And this allows for ease of use and also keeps everything connected, since the tabs transition in between each other instead of a more jarring transition such as constantly switching from screen to screen. You actually see the movement between tabs. So here we have our UML diagram. It all originates from the home class. That is where most of the build content is, and it also contains a lot of the variables and data that is used to build the content. So, for example, it holds a lot of the IDs, it holds the tags, it holds whatever text you're searching with, it holds the current list of recipes, it holds the favorite list of recipes, it holds the groceries, holds images, and when it's building this content, it calls on other classes to generate content within it. So the most common one is generate card on the left-hand side, which the home class shares data with to build. And then in response, the generate card is called to build a content. In this case, it returns the card object that you see on the home screen. In addition to this, we also have the recipe detail screen and the meal planner screen, which are used for the respective tabs to build content. And home shares the data that it needs to with it so that it may build that content. Now, as for where all this data comes from and how it's retrieved, that is from the data helper class on the right, where you can see all the functions at the top, which are used to create the databases, and then all the functions below that used by the class home in order to retrieve the data in those tables that are created. So home calls those functions, whereas data helper is the class that is used to first initialize, store, and then hold that data to be retrieved. So onto the pseudocode for our design. This is covering the homepage, which has a tab layout, which most of the content is built entirely on. Um, this contains the search string and the tags list, so that's the search bar and the selected tabs, which serves the filters. And we have the recipe list, which is generated by the get filtered recipes function, which is built off those filters, which could be updated, retrieve the entire list. So on the first tab, we have where the search bar and filter box are, and when those are changed, the recipe list is generated again with these new filters to update it. And then for every one of those recipes in that list, we generate a card with the recipe, the row. So that includes the ID, the description, the image, all that. Moving on to tab 2, this is basically the same thing, search bar filter box, but it has an additional tag for searching by favorites. When we move on to tab 3, this is where we get the meals recipe list, and this is a list view of all of the planned recipes for the week. And this is just a list where the IDs in the meals table and the recipe table are sort of cross-referenced using the left join. So we get that from the get recipes from meals function. Moving on to tab 4, we have the grocery list, which is sort of the same thing, but a little more complicated. This is where we're getting the meal list from the previous tab, and then from all those meals, we're adding all the ingredients together. And we do this by adding them all to a list using their name, so say like sugar, and then unit, gram, as a key. So it searches by that list, and if it's there, it adds a new field, or maps to a new field, and if it's already existing, then it simply just adds the quantity to that same key. And onto tab 5, this is where the user can input their own recipe. So there's a set of fields I just listed as user input fields, which when submitted inserts all of the necessary parts of a recipe into their respective tables. So URL, description, favorites goes into the recipe table, the tags goes into the recipe tags, and so on and so forth. And at the bottom here, we have a brief overview of kind of what is contained in the generate card. So the row gets passed, and in a inkwell container, um, there's just the widgets for the text, the image, and the tags. And that container has the onClick function to move on to the recipes. So that being, it shows where the instructions and ingredients are. And one more thing for the pseudocode, because this part is kind of the central function. It's the get filtered recipes, which has the search string, the tags, and the favorites check. So what this does is it builds two lists. Where args list, so that's for the where's arg parameter, the argument in the query function for SQL, and then also the conditions list. So these are both what we use to filter with. So if search string, if there is an inputted search in the search bar, that gets added to the filter conditions. And if is favorite is set to true, then you also look where favorite is true in the conditions for the favorite column in the recipe ID or the recipe row. Then we create the string query, and this is what we're building off of to actually make the SQLite query, and it uses the commands like select and from and such, which we're building upon based on what we have. So if these conditions that we just mentioned exist, then we search the recipe table where those conditions are valid. So we search where there are where there is a recipe of a certain name and where it is favorite. So from there we map that result from that query, uh, and from that mapped result we check again if there are tags, and we get the tags from each of those recipes. And from the list map results, we find everywhere that those tags are also contained, which returns the filtered list from the tags and then the search and the favorite. Um, Here is our repo. That is the link to it. Should be public. And here is the demo. Okay, so here we are with the demo. We are starting up the recipe app. Um, so here we are on the home tab. You can see the recipe cards. They had an animation when they first loaded in. They had a fade in and also move upwards. This is just to make it more pleasing. Each of these cards contain the image, the name, as well as any tags. If you go ahead and use the search functionality, we can search for, say, chicken dish. Wow, this is laggy. Uh, and we can see we filter the name chicken. And if we go ahead and do this once more by tags, uh, we can say pick something that is vegan. We can apply the filters, and we are left with one recipe card now. If we go ahead and click this, we can get brought to the recipe page for this item. So here's the tags, here's the buttons to favorite and share it. Here's the ability to add it to a meal plan, ingredients, instructions. So let's go ahead and favorite this. And if we hit share, you can see this gives us the ability to share this. It doesn't work so great on an emulator, but and let's go ahead and add it to a meal plan. Let's go ahead and add this to Sunday Monday. So keep in mind this recipe calls for 150 grams of oyster mushrooms. So keep that in mind for later. So if we go to the planner, we can see the 2 days we added it. There, the recipe is listed. We can go ahead and save it, and we can also go ahead and generate a grocery list. Moving over a tab, we have the favorites. We hit the favorite button, so there it is, and nothing else because nothing else is favorited. And let's go over to the groceries, and you can see it generated the ingredients, the list that you would need for all the recipes combined. And so not only did it grab the ingredients from one of the oyster dishes, but it also added up the additional recipe. So it added up all the ingredients for the entire meal plan. So instead of saying 150 grams, here it says 300 because there's 2 instances of it. And on the last tab here, we have the new recipe tab, so we can enter our own recipe here. Let's call it test. Let's enter a description, call it test description. We are asked to select an image. It pulls us to our photos, and here I have one sample photo here. Once we select it, it shows us a sample of it. Let's go ahead and get some ingredients. Let's just call it test. It's got only one of them. Now, let's say this is just test unit. And so for instructions, you can see we have a box here. Let's just call this test one. We can add another instruction. We can remove it if we want. But let's go ahead and do this. We can do the same for ingredients. And let's go ahead and add a couple tags to this actually. So let's make this spicy and vegetarian. And we can pre-mark it as a favorite. So with all those fields, we can do submit. So now that we have our recipe added, if we go over to our favorites, you can see it is there. And you can even see it on the home screen. And if we go ahead and search by spicy, actually, no, let's start with search by vegetarian. We can see we have 2 options here. We add on the second tag, filters out the other one. If we type in something that it's not in there, it doesn't come up. But if we search up his name, it stays. And of course, we can go to it, gives us the tags, gives us the ability to favorite. And because it's favorited, it's now unfavoritable. Share, same stuff. If we like say, that's our meal plan, generate another list. and it's a little hard to see because of the notifications. But as you can see, there's our test unit, the recipe and meal planners grocery list.